Before a wealthy woman agreed to marry the man she loved, she made a decision that would change both of their lives forever. She pretended to lose everything, her job, her savings, her stability, just to see if he would stay. What happened next was something she never could have prepared herself for. It was a quiet Thursday evening in the kind of neighborhood where the houses sat far apart and the driveways were long enough to make you feel like the world had given you space to breathe. Seraphine pulled into her garage and sat in the car for a moment before going inside. She was 31 years old, the founder of a logistic consulting firm that had grown faster than she had ever planned for, and lately she had been thinking about Darian more than she wanted to admit. Darian had been in her life for 2 years. He was a structural engineer, smart, steady, the kind of man who brought his own umbrella and still held it over you. They had talked about the future in the way people do when they are serious, but have not yet made it official. She had seen the way he looked at her when he did not think she was paying attention. She knew what it meant. She also knew she had not said yes to the question he had not yet asked. That evening, after dinner, Seraphine sat on the couch and stared at her phone. A few days earlier, she had lunch with her old friend Rochelle. Not the Rochelle from the list, a different woman entirely. No, her friend's name was Patience. Patience had been married for 6 years and was now separated. She had told Seraphine something over that lunch that had not left her mind since. He was wonderful when things were going well, for both of us, Patience had said. But the moment my business went under, something shifted in him. At first it was small things. He stopped making plans. Then he stopped asking how I was doing. Then one day I realized I could not remember the last time he had looked at me like I mattered. Seraphine had listened. She had nodded and said the right things. But later, that night, alone in her house, a quiet and uncomfortable question had settled inside her. What would Darian do if the money disappeared? What would he do if the firm collapsed and the house was gone and she had nothing left but herself? She thought about it for 2 weeks. She tried to push it away. She reminded herself that Darian had never given her a reason to doubt him, but the question did not leave. It only grew quieter, which made it harder to ignore. And so, on a Saturday morning when Darian came over and they were sitting together at the kitchen table, she told him something that was not true. She set her mug down carefully. She looked at him. Her voice was steady. "Darian," she said, "I need to tell you something." He looked up from his coffee. Something about her tone made him set it down. "I've been dealing with something for a while now. I didn't want to say anything until I knew for sure." She paused. "The firm is in serious trouble. A major client pulled out without notice, and I had co-signed a credit line that I wasn't supposed to, and now the bank is calling it in. I'm looking at losing the business. Maybe the house too. I don't know yet." The table felt very still. Darian looked at her for a long time without speaking. "When did this happen?" he finally asked. "Over the last few months," she said. "I've been trying to handle it quietly." He was quiet again. Then he reached across the table and put his hand over hers. "We will figure it out," he said. "You are not handling this alone." Those words were the right words. But Seraphine had already committed herself to the plan. She told herself she needed to see what came next, not just what he said in the first 5 minutes. Over the following weeks, Seraphine built the fiction carefully. She told Darian the bank had sent formal notices. She mentioned she was speaking to a financial advisor. She moved through the story slowly and consistently. She watched him. In the beginning, Darian showed up more than he usually did. He cooked on evenings when she said she was too tired. He came over without being asked and sat with her through the silence. He did not offer solutions constantly the way some men do, filling the room with advice as though feelings were just problems waiting to be fixed. He mostly just stayed. But Seraphine kept watching. She told herself she needed more than kindness in the first few weeks. She needed to see how he held up over time. 3 weeks in, she told him the firm had officially closed. She said she had told team. She let herself cry a little, which was not entirely performance. There was something in the act of pretending to lose something that made the loss feel briefly real, and it shook her more than she had expected. Darian held her. He did not say anything for a while. Then he said, "I have savings, not a fortune, but enough to help you stabilize while you figure out the next move. Whatever you need, it is there." She shook her head. I can't take your money, Darian. But he looked at her calmly. It is not charity, he said. You are my partner. What's mine is part of what we are building together. That is how I see it. She looked away because she did not want him to see her face. A month passed. Seraphine told Darian she had moved her savings into the wrong account trying to settle a debt and that she was behind on her mortgage. It was not true. She watched him closely. He did not pull back. He did not become distant. He did not start making quiet comments about her financial decisions. He did not treat her like a burden. He came over on a Wednesday evening and helped her go through what she described as her outstanding invoices, sitting beside her at the table with a notepad, treating her situation like it was something they were solving together. At one point he looked up and said, You know, you could come and stay with me for a while, if things get tighter. The offer is there whenever you want it. She looked at him for a moment. She felt something move through her chest that she did not fully have a name for. Thank you, she said. I'll think about it. She drove home that night, thinking she had everything she needed to know. But she told herself she would wait a little longer. She wanted to see what happened when real inconvenience came into the picture. Not just patience, actual disruption. 2 weeks later, she set up the next scene. She told Darian that her car had been repossessed as part of the settlement. She asked, very quietly, if she could borrow his car on Tuesdays and Thursdays when he worked from home, just to get to some freelance consultations she had managed to line up. She apologized twice while asking. He stopped her mid-apology. You never have to apologize for asking me for help, he said. Take the car whenever you need it. I can work it out. She took the car on Tuesday. She drove around for 2 hours and parked at a cafe and sat there feeling something she had not expected, a heaviness that was not quite guilt but was close to it. She ordered a tea she did not drink and sat with the feeling and tried to understand it. By this point, she had been watching Darian for over 2 months. He had not flinched once. He had not grown impatient. He had not treated her differently. He had offered money, time, his home, his car, his presence. He had done all of it without making her feel small, and she had lied to him every single day. She drove back to his place that evening. He was in the kitchen when she came in. He smiled when he heard the door open. How did it go? He called out. Fine, she said. She stood in the hallway for a moment. Then she walked into the kitchen. She sat down at the table. Darian, she said. He turned around. He saw her face. His expression shifted immediately. What is it? What's wrong? There is something I need to tell you, she said, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything. He came and sat across from her. He waited. She told him everything. She told him about patience and what she had said over lunch. She told him about the question that had not left her mind. She told him about the plan. She told him about the fake bank notices and the fabricated firm closure and the car she had borrowed under false pretenses. She told him all of it, her voice quiet and steady, and she did not look away from him even when she wanted to. When she finished, the kitchen was very silent. Darian looked at the table for a long time. Then he stood up. He did not say anything. He walked out of the kitchen. She heard him in the living room. Then she heard the front door open and close. She sat at the table alone. The silence was a different kind of quiet now, heavy and cold. She did not move for a long time. She stared at the table where his coffee mug still sat, half full. She thought about calling him. She did not. She thought about going after him. She did not do that either. She had done the damage and she understood that he needed to be outside of it for a while. She drove home. She sat in her driveway and stared at her front door. Then she went inside and sat on the couch in the dark for a very long time. That night her phone was quiet. The next morning it was still quiet. She went to work, her actual office, her actual firm, which was doing fine, and she sat at her desk and could not focus on anything. Her assistant knocked twice before she noticed. She apologized and sent the woman away. Around noon, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Darian. It said, I need a few. Wrote back, okay, take whatever you need. She put the phone face down on her desk and did not look at it again for the rest of the afternoon. 3 days passed. She filled them with work and long evening walks through her neighborhood, the kind where you don't really look at anything, you just move your body through space, because it is better than sitting still. She thought about Darian constantly. She replayed everything. She understood clearly, for the first time, the difference between seeing something from the outside and living with the weight of it. She had not expected to feel this way. She had expected to feel relieved, to have her answer, and move forward with it. Instead, she felt like she had broken something that had been very carefully and patiently built. On the fourth day, her doorbell rang. Darian was standing on her porch. He was wearing his grey jacket, the one he had on the first evening they ever spent together. Though she did not think he knew, she remembered that. He looked tired but calm. She stepped back from the door. He walked in. They sat in the living room. He did not sit close. He sat in the chair across from the couch, and he laced his fingers together and looked at her. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" he said. She shook her head. "Not the test itself," he said. "I've thought about it a lot, and I understand where it came from, even if it is not how I would have handled it. The hardest part was realizing that while I was sitting with you through all of it, the fake news about the firm, the mortgage, the car, while I was genuinely worried about you and trying to figure out how to help, you were watching me, you were evaluating me, and I didn't know." He paused. "I felt like a subject in an experiment I hadn't agreed to," he said. "That is what hurt." Seraphine looked at him steadily. "You're right," she said. "I should have talked to you instead of testing you. What I did was not fair to you, and I'm sorry, Darian, genuinely. Not because things fell apart, but because you deserved honesty from me, and I chose something else." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Did you get your answer?" She looked at him. "Yes," she said. "More than I was looking for, actually." He nodded slowly. He looked at the window for a moment. Then he looked back at her. "Here is what I need you to understand," he said. "I stayed through those months not because I was performing for some invisible audience. I stayed because I love you, and because that is what I do when I love someone. I show up. I don't leave when things get hard." He leaned forward slightly. "But I also need to be with someone who will come to me when they are afraid instead of building a stage set. If you have a real question about us, you ask me. That is how this works." She felt something inside her loosen at those words. The kind of loosening that happens when you have been holding something tightly for too long. "I hear you," she said, "and I mean it when I say I won't do anything like this again." He looked at her for a long time. Then the corner of his mouth moved. "I know," he said. "I know you won't." They sat in the quiet of her living room for a while longer. Outside, the light had shifted to the particular gold of a late afternoon in October, the kind that fills a room gently. Nobody moved for a while. Neither of them needed to. Eventually, Darian stood up. He looked at her once more. "I'm not done being with you," he said simply. "But I needed to say all of that first." She stood up too. She crossed the room and hugged him, and he held on. For a moment, neither of them said anything, and the room was just a room, and outside the October light was doing what it always does, and everything felt, for the first time in weeks, like it was sitting properly in its place. A month later, Seraphine's closest friend threw what she described as a long overdue dinner party, the kind with a good tablecloth and too many dishes, and the comfortable noise of people who know each other well. Seraphine arrived. Not knowing that Darian had spoken to the friend 2 weeks earlier, and that the guest list had been quietly shaped with one particular moment in mind. After dinner, when the table was still crowded with wine glasses and half-finished dessert plates, Darian reached into his jacket pocket. The room had already shifted in the way rooms do just before something real happens. A slight quieting, a holding of breath, people suddenly finding somewhere to set down their forks. He looked at her. He did not make a speech. He was not that kind of man. He simply said her name, the way he always did, and then he said, "I would like to spend the rest of my life figuring things out with you, if you'll let me." The ring was simple and the room was warm, and Seraphine said yes before he had finished the sentence. 2 months after that, on a Saturday that started with rain and ended in the most improbable, clear, pale blue sky, they were married. The ceremony was small. 40 people, a hall with tall windows, speeches that went on slightly too long and were better for it. Darian's grandmother sat in the front row and held a handkerchief the entire time. Seraphine's mother cried through the vows in the quiet, controlled way of a woman who had always believed her daughter would find her way here. At the end of the evening, When most of the guests had gone, and a few close friends lingered over the last of the wine, Seraphine found herself standing with Patience near the window. The two of them looked out at the empty street below. "You started all of this," Seraphine said. "Do you know that?" Patience smiled. "I know," she said. "I hoped I would." They stood there for a moment longer. The street outside was quiet and the room behind them was warm, and everything that had passed. The fear, the plan, the lie, the silence of those 4 days had become part of the story instead of the ending, and in that way somehow it had led exactly to where she was standing now.